We made a video talking about what role Black Ops 6 would play in Black Ops 7. A small sidetrack, a small topic that I wanted to expand upon here is Marshall in Call of Duty Black Ops 7. Now, Marshall was the new protege of Frank Woods in Call of Duty Black Ops 6. He ended up meeting Russell Adler and he became acquainted with Russell Adler and they kind of became like partners. So now you have Russell Adler, who is a seasoned, mysterious, pretty dope CIA agent, and you also have a seasoned CIA agent, badass soldier in Frank Woods teaching this young up-and-comer who already has a lot of experience himself and wants to lead and do the right thing in Marshall. Now, Marshall kind of runs his own team, has his own stuff, and he's a leader. So clearly you have two pretty badass guys, pretty badass dudes teaching Marshall how to be basically the next badass and how to do cool things. So I also felt that Marshall was kind of the main focus almost of the marketing for Black Ops 6. He was like the face. He's on the cover. We saw him first. His key art design was kind of everywhere. And he was just one of those big players in the campaign. We followed his lead. He was our leader. We were playing as Case for most of the game. And so Marshall had a really big impact on the campaign of Black Ops 6. However, I will say that once the campaign ended and we moved on into the Warzone story, I really thought that Marshall would have had a bigger role to play in Warzone. But those first two seasons really felt focused on the guild and Savati Dumas and kind of her world and her things. It almost felt like she was the leader of that part of the group and Marshall was kind of pushed to the side. I thought that was a little weird because I would have assumed that Marshall would have been front and center for a lot of these Warzone seasons. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't really think that in any season Marshall took center stage, because season 1 and 2 were about Savati Dumas, season 3 was about Hudson, and season 4 was about Stitch and Adler. So where the fuck is Marshall in all of this? Marshall kind of semi-appeared in some of the cinematics and in some of the gameplay trailers. He got a lot of skins, but again, he wasn't much of a real focus when it came to the Warzone storyline. And I just found that very disappointing, because at the end of the day, you market your Black Ops 6 campaign around Marshall and you make him the focus. You would expect him to play a bigger role. You would expect him to make the big decisions and to be more playable, to be more like a Captain Price, to be more like an Alex Mason, to be more like a Woods, to be one of those characters that really, stays his welcome and who really connects with the audience and kind of maybe almost like an Adler type of character. He's a new face and he's one of these new faces that Black Ops is trying to push. And so I wanted to see a lot more from Marshall, to be quite honest with you, after the campaign ended. But it makes me wonder, you guys kind of spent a lot of time crafting this character, trying to get the audience to like this character. Do you just completely forget about him in the next Black Ops game? In Black Ops 7? Do we not get any mention at all about Marshall? To be quite honest, because the game is so recent, because the story is so recent in our minds, we just played the campaign, we're just getting to know Marshall, wouldn't it be a little weird or a little odd if Black Ops 7 comes and goes and we don't get any mention of Marshall whatsoever? I think it'd be a little weird. Now, obviously, we have to wait for the season of Warzone to officially end, and maybe something happens with Marshall here. Maybe he gets killed. Maybe he goes into hiding. Maybe, I don't know what could happen to Marshall here before Black Ops 7 comes out and the ending of Warzone. But if nothing drastic happens and he barely gets mentioned again, then do we forget about him completely for Black Ops 7? Because I think that there's potential for Marshall. I think Marshall was one of those characters that had a lot of potential. You could probably follow him in another game and he could be the lead again, and maybe see him a little bit more seasoned, a little bit more aged up, and now taking on harder situations, maybe without Woods, maybe without Adler, kind of in his own world, taking everything that he learned in his experiences in Black Ops 6 and applying them to a new threat, to a new team, and doing new things and new assignments. I think Marshall could have done that quite well. I think he's one of those characters that could potentially, sadly, be misused, or whatever potential he had, it could have been squandered if they don't really do anything with it, because so far it seems like they haven't. I think if you go the route of having any type of flashback missions in Call of Duty Black Ops 7, some of you guys mentioned that maybe the early 2000s and the war on terror, kind of began. You guys mentioned that maybe we could do some missions in that type of scenario, in that type of world. Maybe play as a young David Mason and kind of see what he went through and the things that he did and the choices that he made back then. Wouldn't it be kind of cool if Wood said, hey, I have somebody that I want you to meet. You guys are going to go on this mission together to stop somebody or capture this terrorist or do something. And it's Marshall. And Marshall comes up and he says, you know, I work with Woods and let me teach you a thing or two. Let me show you some stuff. And then we play maybe some of the missions from Marshall's perspective. Maybe in the future, Marshall is still alive and, you know, David Mason seeks his help or his advice on the orders of Woods. Maybe Woods passed away and he left a note for David Mason and said, hey, if you need anything or if you need help on the guild, we faced the guild back in the 90s and this guy can help you. And it's, you know, Marshall. And then we go and see Marshall and then Marshall tells us a story and we play as Marshall in the early 2000s or something before the guild really took off. I don't know. Something like that would be really interesting. It would be really cool to do. And it would kind of give us more to do with Marshall. It would give us even more of a backstory, more of a, you know, this character is someone we made. We believe in this character and we're going to push this character a little bit more. Because if I'm being honest with you, I had no problem with Troy Marshall. I thought he was a pretty cool character. I thought his design was pretty nice. I thought he was strong-willed. I thought he had and carried good leadership skills. I thought that he was a savage, to be quite frank. And just seeing him misused or not seeing him used enough has been really disappointing. And I do wonder and I do hope that he has a decent sized role to play in Black Ops 7. And I also think that it would help with the connection, with the bridging the gap between all of these different games. I think it'd be cool to see Marshall and maybe David Mason meet somehow.